Let's turn now to the situation in Yemen and some rare good news, because donor countries have pledged almost $1.1 billion at a conference in Geneva to tackle a humanitarian crisis which aid agencies say is now the world's largest. But that's still only half of what the United Nations says it needs to avert famine in Yemen, where a child dies every 10 minutes of hunger and disease. The UN says nearly 19 million people, or two-thirds of Yemen's population, needs emergency aid, and 2 million children are acutely malnourished. Well, let's cross now live to Geneva and speak to the United Nations Refugee Agency's William Spindler. And William Spindler, welcome to the programme. Let's start with the positive. You've raised nearly half the amount of money you need. You must be greatly encouraged.
We are. I have spoken to my colleagues in Yemen, and they are really over the moon with this news. It means that we'll be able to deliver the badly needed assistance that millions of people need in Yemen. But I think it's also very important because it sends a very strong signal that this conflict, this situation that has been for a very long time ignored, now is finally getting the attention it deserves.
Just give me an idea of what that sum of money potentially could buy and how quickly you can get that there on the ground.
Well, this is exactly what needs to be done now. We need to make sure that these pledges, these very generous pledges, are actually transformed into contributions that can be converted into aid, and that it can be delivered as well, because one of the main constraints that we have faced in the past is access to the civilian population. Without having access to the people we need to help, it's very difficult to deliver the assistance that is so badly needed. So these things need to be put in place. The security of aid workers needs to be guaranteed. This is also a concern, and it has been in the past. But the news in general are very positive. This is a very encouraging step in the right direction. It means that the international community is taking this situation seriously and committing itself to dealing with what could have been a major humanitarian catastrophe.
But those threats to aid workers have long been there. You talk about the problem of access. How are you going to get that access? Because without it, you simply cannot help. So what practically are you going to do?
So far, we have been able to deliver aid. I'm talking about our agency, the UN Refugee Agency. We have been able to deliver aid to over 700,000 people in Yemen, in all over the country. But the conditions in which we work are very difficult. Our colleagues on the ground are facing dangers every day doing their job, and together with the support of the international community in the form of this funding, we also need to have a political process to bring this conflict to an end, because the humanitarian response is only part of the solution.
Sure, I'll come back to that.
Sorry to peace to the country, so that.
Sorry to interrupt you. I will come back to the broader solution in a moment in terms of trying to get some sort of peace settlement. But you didn't answer the question about practically what are you actually going to do to get the access that you so desperately need?
Well, on a daily basis, we are in touch with all the different parties to the conflict to guarantee access so that we can deliver aid. This has to be done on a case-by-case situation. It involves often long negotiations, and on the whole, we have been managed to secure access sporadically, but this needs to become a regular feature so that we can deliver aid regularly and consistently to those who need it. It's an ongoing process. We have been able to reach most parts of the country, but still a regular access to the civilian population is necessary.
The thing about this is that there is a huge difference to actually getting donor countries to pledge money and actually getting the warring parties to stop the conflict. And there is absolutely no encouragement in that part of the equation, is there?
Well, we hope that by bringing this humanitarian response to the ground, that will also facilitate a political process, because it will help to guarantee that the conditions of the civilian population are improved, and this can benefit the political process. But ultimately, the only solution for the suffering of millions of people in Yemen is for this terrible conflict to be brought to an end. And that means the warring parties need to sit together, a stop to the fighting needs to happen, and eventually a peaceful negotiated solution needs to be found.
I read some of the alarming statistics just before we came to you. The trouble of a crisis of this scale, it's not just the numbers who either perished, who are now at risk. The whole way of life, every single structure that sustains life collapses. And that is the scale of what you're facing on the ground, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. Every day is a struggle for survival for most people in Yemen. This conflict has affected practically the whole of the population. As you said in your introduction, 2/3 of the population of the country are in need of humanitarian aid. 10 million people are in need of urgent humanitarian aid just to stay alive. People are fighting against hunger, against sickness, and living in appalling conditions, and being subjected to attacks by the warring parties. So this needs to be brought to an end, because the whole country has gone into a spiral of chaos, and unless the violence and the war are brought to an end, the suffering will continue.
Well, William Spindler, we are very grateful for your time. Thanks so much for joining us live there from Geneva. Thank you.